Hi guys, in this video I'm gonna be annotating Ozymandias. Now this poem is quite short, but it's got very good analysis of it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the context of Ozymandias. So the first thing that you need to know is that Percy Bysshe Shelley, so if we go through the context, Shelley is a romanticist, so is a romantic poet. And that means that he believes that nature is more powerful than man. So a romantic poet believes that nature is more powerful than the actual power of man. So he was against, so if you write this with me, if you're annotating it, he was against monarchies and absolute power and oppression. So, because he believed that nature was more powerful than man, in his poem, this concept, because he was a romantic poem, is constantly brought in. So, if we now look at the form of the poem, this is an ironic sonnet. It's two ends. And it's ironic because a romantic poet is normally, it's usually supposed to be for love. However, this has a very harsh atmosphere. So therefore, it's an ironic sonnet. Now, if we look at the attitudes that are in Ozymandias, there are three main ones that we need to know. And that is pride, power, and arrogance. And just for when we're actually doing the questions, if we need to link it to other poems, here is a list of them that we could link it to. So we could link it to London, possibly, the Prelude, and also Exposure. So if we just go over it again, in the context part, we know, or we need to know, that Shelley is a romanticist. So he believes that nature is more powerful than man. And this is constantly shown in his poem. And because of that, he was against any monarchy, absolute power, and oppression. If we move on to the form of this poem is that it's an ironic sonnet. And that's because it's a harsh atmosphere instead of nice, calm, and loving. The attitudes in this poem we look at pride, power, and arrogance. Yeah, when we go through this, when we annotate it, we can link back to these things. And if we're linking this poem to other poems, we could link to London, the Prelude, and Exposure. So let's start annotating now and analysing the poem. So the first thing that I'm going to do is ask you to make sure that you have read the poem thoroughly, at least 2 to 3 times. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go through every single possible annotation. I'm just going to go through the key ones that I would pick in an exam. So the first quote I would pick is this one. I met a traveller from an antique land. So if we think about it, it says that I met a traveller from an antique land. Let's just process what it says. Now, when we look at, if we look at I met a traveller, we're thinking about that this poem is like a story. So if you write here, poem is like a story. And it basically shows that Percy himself, or Shelley, hasn't seen the statue. He hasn't seen the statue by himself from his own eyes, and it could potentially highlight that there is no real statue and is only heard of. So when you're explaining and when you pick this quote, you need to say that the poem is like a story and it's from a different person's perspective. So it's like something that they've said, and Shelley hasn't seen it from his own view and his own perspective. So when we say that it's only heard of, we need to say that when we think about it further in depth in analysis, we can say that the statue has insignificance. And that is because Shelley hasn't seen it himself. He's just heard of it. So it's only heard of, which highlights insignificance of the statue. Well, there is a statue when we get through. And so when we think about it, so that's the first quote. I met a traveller from an antique land. So the poem is like a story. As we go on, it will talk about a statue around this, so here. And because it's a story and it's only heard of, it's showing the insignificance of that statue. And also, Ozymandias is actually a Greek translation of Ramesses II, which was just an Egyptian pharaoh. So it's linking to that kind of hierarchy, that kind of power, oppression. That's what Shelley's talking about. So the second quote that I'm going to pick and highlight is "Shattered visage lies" here. So this is very ironic. So go here. And that is because it shows that even powerful humans can't control the damaging effects of time. So here we see that shattered means destroyed, and visage is just an image of what's left. So it's ironic because let me just write the analysis. Powerful humans can't control damaging effects of time. So here we can see that Shelley has implemented his views on how nature can overcome the power of man. And this further highlights and it signifies that nature has brutally overpowered man. So let's write that as well. Yeah? So this quote here, shattered visage, we know that it is half sunk. We can see wrinkled lip. We can see all this imagery of how broken the statue is. And that again is highlighting how nature is overpowering man. Now the next quote is on the next line. So sneer of cold command. Now if we think about it, there's alliteration here. So cold command. Cold command. And this highlights, if we think about the how we can hear it, cold command, so it's harsh, isn't it? So it's harsh. So that means that the ruler was harsh, so they harshly treated the people. And this suggests that he was there was also oppression or arrogance. So sneer of cold command. And when you sneer, it's not a very positive, likable thing. It's very negative and it's very harsh. So that quote there, sneer of cold command, implies that the leader whose statue it is was very harsh. And the people who were in that time, they suffered from oppression and a lot of arrogance, maybe even selfishness of that leader. So it could imply selfishness. Again, if we link back to the context, we can see that Shelley is against absolute power and oppression. And this is one of the key things that is in the poem that he's explaining, and he's using alliteration. So this is alliteration here. Using alliteration to create that harsh sound to make it seem that the leader was very, very oppressive and selfish. And the next quote that we're going to look at is, "Nothing beside remains." So if you can see, let me just move it up. Here, "Nothing beside remains." So here, there's a caesura. So we can do the colon right here. And so nothing beside remains. It's like it shuts down the arrogance. So the caesura shuts down the arrogance. And that's because there's nothing left. Nothing besides remains. And if we, as I hope you've read this whole section, I hope you've read the whole poem, and you've got this idea that there's the weather has made him irrelevant. Because of time, as time passes, it's the weather that's making him irrelevant, because nothing can destroy that statue except for the weather, because no one's there. It's actually a desert. Here, so we know it's a desert. So the only thing that can harm the statue is the weather. So the weather has made the statue irrelevant. And again, this links back to the fact that Shelley is a romantic poet. And again, he's implementing the idea that man has no power. It's all the power of nature, and the nature is overpowering man. So remains, nothing is left, is broken. And it just shows that, you know what, the power of man is nothing. Because no matter how long he was there for, as much as he ruled, once he's gone, the nature is tearing him apart. Now, to further implement Shelley's ideas of how powerful nature is, look at these two quotes here in the next line. Colossal wreck, boundless and bare. So first of all, there's assonance over here. So there's assonance. Move this up. And here, there's alliteration. So, what we see here again, further implementation of how nature is overpowering. There's a colossal wreck. So the wreck of the statue is basically mirroring how much importance and how great the leader was, to the colossal level that man thought he had. Because he was the leader, now is a wreck. It's a colossal wreck. And boundless and bare, there's nothing there. Nature is overpowering. So both of these link and say that nature is overpowering. So you can see that throughout the whole poem, even now, you can see that Shelley is constantly saying in his words that nature is overpowering and man has no power, no matter how much he thinks he does. And now the last line here, sand stretched far away, is alliteration here. Again, there's lots and lots of alliteration here. There's 3 times Shelley used alliteration to create that sound. The harsh treatment is implemented, highlighted, signified, whatever you want to say. And again in the last line, sand stretched far away. This far away shows or highlights how nature is sly and it overpowers subtly. So the sand stretch far away. So we can highlight here. We can say that nature is sly. And it overpowers subtly. Because far away, sand stretched far away, is very sly, it's very quiet, it's very vast, and it overpowers subtly. So no matter how much power man thinks he has, he really doesn't, because nature is always overpowering. Now that was Ozymandias, written by Percy Bysshe Shelley. If you like this video, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.